You're on Team Human, Conscious Intervention in the Machine, an opportunity to reclaim the beating heart of human connection, to find the others, network from the bottom up, build rapport, and discover new forms of solidarity. While resistance may seem futile, love is always an option. It's time to intervene on behalf of people and all living things. I'm Douglas Rushkoff, and I'm on Team Human. Playing for Team Human today, novelist, spiritualist, and host of the podcast Against Everyone, my friend Conner Habib. Conner is going to bring us through the crucible of fear and torment back to the landscape of collective awe and heartfelt connection. It's time to intervene on behalf of people and all living things. I'm Douglas Rushkoff, and you're on Team Human. Team Human is sponsored by our friends at Everyone's Earth. I never used a dryer sheet before. The ones my mom used came from the military-industrial complex with artificial polymers camouflaged in scents devised in toxic laboratories. But Kobe dryer sheets? These things are made in an environmentally restorative fashion from 100% biodegradable cotton, and they're scented with essential oils that remind me of a massage I once got at Esalen. Kobe dryer sheets are just the first of a new line of guilt-free, sustainable products coming from Everyone's Earth, including diapers, wipes, tampons, and yes, the Team Human podcast itself. It's a pleasure to bring you all the way from Ireland one of the more enlightened beings walking the earth right now, a former porn star, anthropologist. He wrote the dark but heart-opening novel Hawk Mountain, hosts the radically magical podcast Against Everyone, and counsels a whole lot of us about living in ways consistent with our true purpose. My friend, Conner Habib. It's good to see you at this moment. I know you've been, it's funny, I know you've been counseling people, I guess if you can call it that, sort of counseling, advising. It goes with the territory, I guess. You know, once you've written books or done podcasts or kind of modeled a certain, a certain ability to metabolize trauma and move through life in certain ways, and people kind of ask you for some of the same. I'm wondering what's your feeling about, especially you're over in Ireland now, what's your feeling about the collective trauma that Americans are going through? And I don't just mean, liberals set a presidency, but the kind of the widespread just kind of shock and decalibration that's going on.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways to go about it, and some of them are a little less generous than others. The least generous to people's feelings way is, really relates, I think, to one of your episodes, which I really loved, where you kind of said, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is something we've been talking about for decades. It's been culminating. We've been not just warning about it, but just also trying to articulate and detail what's happening. And it's now people are beginning to see it in a way that they've never seen it before. And it doesn't change really anything. I think the most important thing to consider is that it shouldn't change the direction of what you're doing, or at least the sort of moral, the moral heart of what you're doing in the world. But this is something, again, that we've been saying all along. I have a friend, for example, he's a rock star, and he has an actress friend. I won't say who they are, but she's very given to conspiracy theories long before anything that right now has sort of risen to the surface. And she would send him simulation theory stuff all the time and say, this is the proof. This is the proof. And she kept sending to him. And he was just like, I don't know why she keeps sending this to me. It's not leading her into any sort of action whatsoever. And that's really the point, is that if you are aligned in a way, if you are with your task, what your spiritual life is impelling you to do, then actually these circumstances in some ways don't make a difference. But what that takes is really getting right with your destiny. And I mean, even that concept sounds funny to people now, I think. And so while I'm saying that that's the not a generous way to talk about it, in other words, I'm not kind of appealing to people's feelings.
Mm.
I think that's because people's feelings have been really misleading. And also, we've been luxuriating in the feeling life too much. And in fact, isn't the amped up feeling life what has kind of led us to this moment where things are so intensely expressed as feeling properties? Even like you could obviously see it around the election time, you can see it now. And it's not that we shouldn't have feelings. It's not that we should be cold in our response, but we're living in the feeling life of it. And so when you say trauma, we've been traumatized by the immersion in our own feeling lives at the exclusion of relating it to thinking and acting. And so I think that's part of it. It's that real locked in feeling response to a materialistic worldview that takes your destiny out of the picture.
It's weird though, because one of my main strategies for myself and for others has been almost leaning into that more feeling side of it. So I look at the things on the screen, I look at, Netanyahu or Ukraine or tariffs or something, and I'm like, I'm not sure what I can really do. It's like, oh, stop this tariff, go on a tariff protest or something. And it's like, there's that, or I can really parse and go, okay, because there's tariffs now. I'm worried about my ability to pay for things, and I'm worried about people being poor and all. Or as an artist, thinker, philosopher person, go, okay, breathe, you know,
Mm.
uh, make contact with others, help an old man this old guy fell down in front of the Walgreens and all his drugs fell out, and he just was released from the hospital too soon because of the way they do these things. He just had his hip surgery and didn't know who his caseworker. I walked him, you got to go 10 blocks. I basically carried this guy to his apartment and into the elevator, and I don't know who he was. And at least that was like, okay, I'm doing something. But I guess is leaning into the emotional, spiritual, compassion, art side of this a cop out in that way? Then
No, no, I don't mean that at all. Although I do think for some people it might end up being a cop out. What I'm referring to a little bit more is the yeah, I would even say luxuriating and mourning and grieving that was happening after the election, for instance,
the
where
hand wringing. Oh, it's me. Oh,
exactly. And a lot of
I
people
know,
are
and that
still
was
in
my
that.
monologue was to that. Exactly. I was being like, "Shut the fuck up. Where have you
Yeah,
been?"
yeah. I mean, a lot of people are still in that moment.
Right.
They're still stuck there. And all the language around that, we need to make room to mourn, take this time and grieve. I just kept thinking, no, this is precisely the opposite of what we need to do, because all this intensely expressed feeling is what got us into this war of us against each other, amping it up in this attention, in this attenuating attention tension economy, and that we all just kind of got, stuck there. Well, a lot of us got stuck there. So no, I don't think that that's the same case as helping someone who's fallen
Right.
down or
Well, that's a
yeah,
nice thing, but
yeah.
but I mean, addressing the issues the way I am, which has been in a doula-like fashion,
Mm.
almost like I'm no longer primarily interested in intervening on behalf of society, but uh, coping,
Mm.
uh, moving into almost palliative care.
Well, I do think it's really important for us to all be close to death processes now and to understand them, and to understand that death isn't the end, and that the real hard part is that includes the death of the planet. But I do
Right.
want to say that when you're doing the work that you're doing and you're saying, well, I don't want to intervene, or whatever. I do think actually the work that you're doing, the gifts that you have are your medicine to this moment. It is what you're able to do and what you're able to offer. And the idea that somehow I would go out and protest against tariffs and somehow that would end the tariff system that's in place now and the tariff chaos that's in place is really like inflamed, out of control ego that actually is kind of annihilating the existence of others, including the people who are putting the tariffs in place and getting into the trade war. And so what I'm thinking more about is, what is it that I'm able to offer? But I don't mean that in the let's all do our little part. If you, yeah, I mean, this is all bullshit. If you
Yeah.
recycle and if you go to the protest and if you put out the in this house, we believe science is real sign. And if you do this
Right.
and you do that, it'll all form together. I don't mean that. I don't mean,
Right. But those are performative. I mean,
yes.
most of them anyway. But on the other hand, the let's all do our little part to me is the lesson I had. I almost the mantra I had to give myself to fall asleep last night. I had dinner with this guy who wants to start a network, of a new kind of social network for activism, and we got to do this. And it's like he's right, and it's a thing. But I'm like, there's for many of us, and I think more like the kind of listeners to our shows, if anything, people err on the side of we think we need to respond fully to every email that comes in, and that I'm not doing this form of activism and giving money to that and going to this meeting or joining the advisory board of this, it's like I think it is okay for someone to say, oh, I'm a psychotherapist, and the way I'm helping at this moment is
Yes.
through my psychotherapy. I farm. I'm doing permaculture, You keep doing that, please. You don't need to come to New York and yell at the UN. Just make food in this good way. That's okay.
100%. I mean, that is kind of what I mean about getting right with your destiny, is really offering, working to get as close to the full expression of your own being as possible. And a lot of times that gets us on the right path with the kind of actions we're supposed to take. Then if you go to the
Right.
protest, it's a bonus, or if you do these other things, they can be like a little bit of a bonus, but it's not the thing that's propelling you forward. It's actually about getting, this kind of alignment with who you are and what you're meant to be doing. And by the way, that's not something that you figure out. It's actually kind of not something you really even know until maybe the moment you die or after you cross that threshold,
What's
because it's the
interesting.
expression of your entire life. I mean, we can see people who have lived really up to the full potential of their being. They've resolved what I would say they've resolved their karma. They've lived out their karma, and then they're able to thrive in service to everybody else. And you see a figure like that, a big figure. I mean, they're really easy go-tos like, MLK and Gandhi and all that. But you see a big figure like that, and you're like, how did that one person actually become this hinge or this fulcrum, this pivot for everybody to act and think differently? And the truth is that life is available to all of us in our own way and could be the norm rather than the exception if we were to pursue that way of being. And so that's what I would say people could be doing. It's like you can hold yourself to the standard that you didn't stop the tariffs from happening as much as you want, and you'll go, blue in the face. But you could also instead say to myself, how do I uncover what I'm meant to be, who I be, and what that offers and radiates out? Because that political action doesn't work anymore in the way that you were talking about, because the political system itself is dead. I mean, why would you try to feed into the old structure and the way of responding to it? It's not going to work anymore because the old structure is also old and gone.
Interesting when you said, living up to our full potential. First time you said it, I thought you were saying live up to our fool potential.
Yeah, maybe.
But the beauty of it, though, so then it made me think, because I flashed on the Fool, the tarot card of the Fool. And to live up to your full potential, you kind of do need to start at the Fool,
Mm-hmm.
which is not a foolish card. I don't know if how much you do tarot,
Yeah, I
or
do all the
you.
time. Yeah, yeah,
So the Fool, as a cleansing, as a starting point, it's liberating to. I was getting the Fool a lot in my tarot readings last year, and at first I was upset, and then I was like, oh my God, it's perfect.
mm,
It's like a reboot. It's like there's something so, fresh and open and uh, uh, just self-annihilating about it that
yeah. It's beautiful because the fool, the fool's a lot of things, but the fool, one way of looking at that card is the same way you would look at the fire trial in our spiritual lives. So there are different trials for different elements, but the fire trial is basically once you really step foot on the spiritual path, you cannot ever go back. You have to walk it to the end. And that means everything will be consumed by fire. And in the same way, with the fool, he's about to walk off the cliff. It's like,
yeah,
well, you can look down if you want, but what will happen is the, Wile E. Coyote moment. You'll plummet.
yeah,
You have to keep walking, and you can't ever let go of the bringing forward who you are. And so that's what that card is. And I think it's great. And one of the reasons why it's great too is it's also, even though the path is unforgiving, there's also something very forgiving in it for yourself. Like you were saying, where I'm at the beginning. Actually, I don't know. The one thing I know is that I'm going to keep walking. That's it.
right. And that's the great thing about, like, whenever I go to a yoga class, and I've been going to yoga classes for, God, 20, 30 years, and they go, what level are you at? I always say, oh, I'm a beginner. And it's, beginner's mind. It's a nice place to be. I mean, it's not to say you don't ever learn, but to maintain that openness. But it definitely it ties into what you're saying in terms of just realizing who you are and being with that, rather than trying to, oh, now I've got to be this kind of activist, or now I have to be an economist, or now I have to do that. That rising to the occasion doesn't necessarily mean becoming someone that you're not. It means rising to the occasion as who you really are. You being called means you're being called. You're not being called to be someone else.
Right,
Who are
right.
you?
Yeah, and I think it's so important because we often do, not just with the protest or writing letters or whatever, we often have these misfires in our lives where we think, oh, I'm kind of interested in that thing. When I learn that now, oh, I'm interested in, I don't know, homeopathy or learning to play guitar. Maybe I'll be in a band. Maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll do that. It's all great. I'm not telling people not have interest or have hobbies. But then when we inevitably fail or go halfway down that path and give it up because it wasn't really for us and we're just sort of following the idle interest, do that for fun, but don't mistake that for who you are, and look really into who you are and say, this is actually what I offer. This is a really hard pill to swallow. It's something Hermann Hesse wrote in, I think it was Demian, is something like nothing is more despicable to a man than becoming who he is. I mean, it really is
Mm.
difficult to become who you are, but that is actually what is needed in the world right now. The world wants to change, and we are part of the world. And so to the to the fact that the world can change through some of us, so if we get right with ourselves, then the world actually can change the way it wants to through each of us. And that's why we have to be where we're supposed to be now, doing what we're supposed to be doing. But what we're supposed to be doing isn't some prescribed political, ethical act. It's actually much more individuated, which again is very difficult for people to accept in a time of collective trauma. But just to add to this, the unified feeling that we're having of that pressure, that actually is the adversarial force that's coming at us. Everybody feel the same way. Everyone feel like shit. Everyone feel terrible. Everyone feel like there's no options. Is the same. It's the spatial version of the, well, AI, climate change, fascism, these things are going to happen no matter what. We're just going to have to deal with them. Here they come. So the inexorable sense of time, that things are going to happen no matter what we do. It's not a matter of if, but when. That's the temporal version. And then the spatial version is everyone feel the same way. The claustrophobia is affecting everyone in the same exact way. You're all going to have to deal with these problems. You're all fucked, blah, blah, blah. And so actually, the refutation of that is no, I'm my own person. I'm an individual who's experiencing space and time completely differently than other people. So I'm going to resolve my relationship with space and time and everything else myself, my own way, because I have my way and it's absolutely unique and a universe unto itself.
Right. I mean, I can do that to a point. I would feel weird. It's like, there's the line going into the gas chambers at Auschwitz, and it's like, here's a guy who's like, I'm walking in there, but I'm in my own time and space and all. I mean, but the fact is, if you do get there, that is where you want to be, right?
Exactly.
And that's where
That's right.
that's where a Gandhi or an MLK or Mandela, when he's being tortured in prison, is still the first guy when a reporter comes into the jail cell and he's like, "Can I get you anything?"
Right.
And it's like, dude.
Or Hans and Sophie Scholl, who were executed by the Nazis, being led out. The people were in this group called the White Rose, which was inspired by Rudolf Steiner and other Christian occultism, but they were resisting the Nazis and they were led to their deaths. And the prison guards who were leading them there were weeping because they felt love from these two people that they were going to execute. And they said
Right.
that they were just completely calm and they just went out and then they died. Yes, of course you want to be there. If you're there, you don't want to be there, but if you're there, that's who you want to be.
Right. Well, you will. Right. I mean, in that reaching that state of compassion for humanity and others and everybody and everything.
Right.
Is you don't. Luckily, you don't need gas chambers to go there, right? It's not. There's not.
Yeah.
It's not like they're useful. Well, they're useful at that moment, but
Right.
it's the Jesus moment. He's like, God, forgive these people. They don't know what they're doing. To be able to open your heart there. I mean, but it's not like it has to get there, but it's almost like we need to do this sort of. I do the catastrophic test against things. It doesn't mean. Going to that place doesn't it's not wrong. Going to that place doesn't negate anybody or anything. It's the if you can celebrate every breath, no matter where or how it's happening, that's not ignoring anything. Team Human is sponsored by Everyone's Earth, the maker of Kobe dryer sheets and an emerging line of totally biodegradable cotton products to use instead of the plastic crap being produced by the big soap companies. I used my first Kobe dryer sheet this week, and I'm enjoying the softness that I thought was beyond the physical and spiritual potential of my clothes and towels. I am living in a new, soft, biodegradable cotton reality that rivals plant medicine in its ability to connect the experience of goodness to positive impact on everyone and everything. And they make this show possible.
And celebrating the end of breathing as well, being able to look at, death and know that this was coming for you. And it's found perhaps a form that you don't prefer or that you don't like, and a form that the real tragedy beyond just your own death or the death of your comrades or fellows, which is terrible enough, is that others are exacting it on people. That's completely tragic. And so then you're receiving the suffering of the other and then you're dying, but that's not the end. That there's something beyond this. This is very difficult because what people think when you say something like this is like, oh, well, so it's okay if you just die, who cares? There's nothing to worry about, whatever. I'm not saying that. It would be, as you're saying, much better if we didn't need these things, or if we could do it without, if, in fact, we don't need them if
Of
we
course not.
chose to not bring them in to get to where we need to
Right.
go.
Right,
Yeah.
but it's I mean in politics and gas chambers and whatever, which I don't think are coming. I think it's tax audits that are coming for people more than more than this is death by 1,000 audits,
Yeah, yeah.
or you losing your loans applications
Mm.
or mortgage thing. This is going to be, I think, way more subtle, um, and not as bad as that. I don't have that same sort of catastrophic thinking, but I'm almost more concerned with the way I see people moving through life. So
Mm. Yeah.
let's take another. So I'm out in the world now, and I'm seeing, say, how uh, the sexual liberation scene is happening now, and how the poly scene in New York is manifesting itself. And I hear, polyamory, and I think even though it's mixing Greek and Roman roots into an improper word, I still hear poly's many and amor's love, right?
Mm.
Many love. And it's like, oh, that's great. Everyone's going to love each other and all. And I talk to people about the not, and I'm sure it's not everybody, but about the poly lifestyle thing they're living. And I talked to this one guy who says, well, yeah, I use the hub and spoke model, meaning rather than a polycule network where they all know each other, hub and spoke means he's like the hub and
Mm.
keeps 5 people in his stable at all times. And and then I was like, oh, so you have 5 people you love? And he goes, yeah, yeah. And then he's talking a little bit more. He says, yeah, but I'm thinking of switching one out. Right, because he met someone else,
Mm.
and he's thinking he met someone younger and hotter, whatever. So he's gonna switch one out, and it sounded like this kind of stable, right? It's like I've got these 5 racehorses I'm working on, and I can only really afford 5 at a time or have the time, so I'm gonna switch one out. I go down a young filly that looks promising. I'm gonna switch one out, and there was something so utilitarian
Mm.
about it, the way, and I mean, sex is good. Have sex the way you want, and if everybody's honest and keeping their Google Poly spreadsheet rule set, whatever, gig is in, as Grandma would say. Go in good health. But there's a utility
Yeah.
value model of the other person. And then when I'm talking to other people who are like, oh, I need someone who's going to dominate me, or I need someone to make me do it. And I'm listening to the kind of the not the desires people have of what they want to do within the sacred circle of play. It's like once you're in there, once you have full consent, you want to go nuts, do whatever it is, poop, whip, but it's like outside the sacred circle where they want that semi-dominant violence. I need to be pushed into this. I need that. And it's like, no,
Mm.
that's that. It seems to me that in our social sexual interactions now that we're mimicking a lot of the sort of the dom violence that we're seeing in the sort of macro political world.
Well, I mean, as someone who, for, well over a decade has been, asked to speak in spaces about, sexuality, sex work, something I've always said about polyamory, open relationships are, look, the same way that so much of monogamy is built on insecurity, so much polyamory is built on the, unwillingness to commit. And
Right.
the the good or bad isn't in either way that you
Right.
decide to live your life. It's, are you doing this out of, freedom or compulsion? And, it's tough because you can't determine that for anyone else when it comes to sexuality. Sexuality is like the most individual thing in the world. It's, as so many factors are there, that it's kind of like the out picturing of how we're all individual souls. And so it's, you can't say that for someone. You can't look at someone else's relationship and be like, you're doing this wrong and this is damaging to
Wrong.
you,
Right.
because you really don't know. Someone could like being flogged, and it's a completely healthy thing for them, and another person could like it and it's sending them back into the reliving and re-engagement with the things that wounded them in a very unhealthy way. You can't tell from the outer experience. And I think that people in general, and I think this is a general principle, it's not just applied to sexuality, but they think that because they've liberated themselves from the default cultural constraint, that somehow they are radical or healthy. But
Right.
liberation is a healing act. But you can't just be healed. You also have to go beyond that and thrive and do more. And so a lot of times when people liberate themselves from the sexual constraint of monogamy, man, woman, cisgender, whatever it is, then they'll get again stuck in this level of, okay, well, the healing, the liberation is it. This is the thing. But, if you are sick and you eat a raw food diet to make yourself healthy, but then you keep doing the thing that healed you, eventually you're going to, if not physically, emotionally, psychically, re-evoke the illness because you're actually lingering in the technique of healing. And so I do think that that's part of what's happening. I mean, I think there's a broader principle that maybe we can talk about where liberation just isn't enough. But I do think that beyond that, or more specifically in these communities around sexuality and sex positivity and everything, um, people really are caught in that. I mean, I definitely see it in, um, if there's such a thing as gay culture, I definitely see it in my culture, my community, where there is this sort of wallowing where there could be more movement, more progress, more excitement, more, um, again, sort of like individuation, understanding, coming together, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's in all of these situations we're talking about. It's
Mm.
people get to a certain point, or they see the problem, but then get trapped in the rage over it, get trapped in the escape from it. It's like you're running from, okay, now what are you running to?
Right,
And
right.
the experience is so common. It's so uh, these it's universal in a sense, whether the sexually liberated person or the sexually repressed person, the red state person or the blue state person, you know what I mean? It's like they're all experiencing, if not the same thing, then mirrors of the same thing, or reactions to the same to the same triggers.
They get caught in a set. I mean, I think that this is something that you and I talk about privately. Again, I won't name names, but
Yeah.
I've definitely had people on my podcast or people whose podcasts I've been on, where I'm like, I could just see where they got stuck. And usually there's an incentive to get stuck, or to be stuck. Sometimes the incentive is just fear to move forward, or not knowing how to move forward, or whatever. And this isn't a moral judgment just yet, by the way, because we all have to work out and untie our knots
Mm.
and figure out how to move forward. But then I see people are really incentivized by being stuck. They get a level of fame, a level of money, whatever it is,
Right.
and they know that they can keep, quote unquote, growing their audience. They're not actually growing their audience, they're replicating thoughts in more people. um,
And get more money. You do the same record 20 times and the band makes more money.
totally. And what that ends up doing is holding everybody back. And so I think it's really frustrating, and again, this is like something you and I talk about, is like, well, they've got this part right, but not this part. Don't they see this part? It's like,
Right.
and a lot of times that also has to do with outside forces, where we're kind of stuck into our shtick by, all the positive feedback we get. We're like, wow, I'm really helping people with this initiative. And
Mm.
then we start blocking out everything else that's available to us.
Right.
The easiest way to do that is when we have people that we consider our opponents, or people that we hate, or whatever. And then unfortunately and we block them out and we block their voices out, but then unfortunately the alternative is like, we need to have open debate with these people that are doing horrible things in the world. It's like, that's also not
Yeah.
satisfactory.
No, the interesting thing for me about, I mean, I've been lucky with the Team Human audience is I'll get usually the most positive reinforcement, like through email or on the Discord, when I've taken a risk and tried something that I was scared was going to piss everybody off. Seriously,
Yeah.
like the first monologue I did in this new thing, it was this little 7-minute monologue where I'm like, where the fuck? Why are you complaining? This is what have we been, and I went through, Naomi Klein told us it, and this, she told us this, and this one told us. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to be so pissed because I'm supposed to like be, helping. And people were like, thank you, I needed that. And and I was like, whoa, okay. And it wasn't like I was doming them, or it wasn't I wasn't punishing people because I brought it around to why we're going to be okay. But in each one, and then the monologue I did after that, I was really scared, where I was like, again, trying to do this thing, and it's what Grant Morrison told me after 9/11. And he said it in a different way. But I was like all freaked out. We were having a breakfast in the East Village he was visiting. It had happened like a month or two before. And he was like, Doug, you don't need to do anything about this at all, man. They don't listen to us. They didn't listen to us before. They're not going to listen to us now. Just do your work. You're an artist. You don't have to, that whole thing. Just do your thing. Find your people. And I don't know if I could ever go quite that far because he's just so confident in in his work. But I think on a certain level, he's saying what you're saying. The job is the same. Manifest as you appropriately to the moment.
That's right.
And it's all you can do.
Yeah. And the reason, well, first I want to say, to the positive feedback I get on the episodes that I do of Against Everyone with Conner Habib are when I do the ones that I think no one's going to understand. So first of all, there's on both our parts an underestimation of the people that
Right.
are with us, and that's probably comes mostly from a sense of isolation and alienation at looking out at the world and feeling alone, even in our own thoughts, even as you and I are people who speak to so many interesting, cool people all the time, still feeling isolated and alone sometimes. And so then when people are like, no, what you did was cool, thank you. I didn't understand all of it, or I didn't agree with all of it, or whatever, but finally, we're kind of kicking things up and moving things along. So I think it's really important to name that feedback, and also to say it's interesting that happens for you in this place and me in this instance. I think as far as what Grant said, um, Grant's really great with that. Sometimes it can be a little grating because it doesn't matter what happened. You have the feeling that someone could be cutting off his leg and he'd be like, oh my gosh, I've just got to
This is so interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe the larva
Oh my
will grow
God.
back my calf, you know what I mean, or whatever. But like, but I do think part of what he's saying, and just relating it back to that word destiny I was using again, is that this what he's saying can get really confused for this sort of like um Western Buddhist or Advaita Vedanta or New Age concept that everything is fine, everything's perfect, it's all just love and light or whatever.
That's kind of spiritual bypass. Is that what
Yeah,
that's?
yeah, just like everything's perfect as it is, whatever. The truth is, like, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. We do have lots of problems, but your destiny is perfect. So that's the thing where it's like, can I move back into the perfect, the part of me that is actually never suffering, the life that is meant to be led, the way I am meant to bring who I really am, what my being is to this world. That is perfect. But life is a process of getting in touch with that. And that's, one of the best Rudolf Steiner quotes is like, man, we'll say the humans are not free. The human being is not free, but on the way to becoming free, and that's it. It's like resolving where we are unfree by moving towards that freedom, which is really another name for love and compassion.
Right. And you never get there though.
No, I mean maybe after you do a few centuries of bodhisattvaing, you get to like become part of the godhead in the next galaxy and start training people there or whatever as some angelic force. But because
And that's
creation
some
is
other
open.
person. That's
Yes.
some other person who happens to have some of my spirit
Yeah.
juice in them, right?
Yeah, that's right. Like you definitely, your personality will not be composed in the same way by the time you get by the time you get
Right.
there.
Unless you get resurrected, like so some future super reincarnation of you a billion years from now,
Mm.
they get awakened and then you show up again. It's like you get integrated. Maybe you
Yeah.
come,
Well, we
that'd be
definitely
cool.
have a memory of our past lives, but when we say memory, it's not like remembering what you ate yesterday. It's a memory that's embedded in some aspect of our being. So this is like memory is such an expansive thing. It's not just a thought. It's not just a
Right.
recurring.
Data.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like my ear is, shaped this way because I was this person in the past life, or I have I say this word a bunch of times. Maybe I use the word incredible all the time because that's an expression of the architecture of my thoughts in the past life, or you know what I mean? It's all that kind of stuff. That's memory too, but we don't call it memory because we have a very limited idea of what that is. So that's just to say, your future angelic new galaxy creating self will remember this podcast episode that we've been doing. And remember you.
Of course. Of all those things. You won't remember your lovers, your parents, but you'll remember Conner. uh, so you're still doing practice? Do you do stuff that's like distinct from just walking around and
you know, for a long time I didn't. I wonder where you're at with this too, because people talk about spiritual practice all the time, but the problem with spiritual practice, as it were, is that you, for most of us, I think that changes over time what that's meant to be. So we get this idea that we're going to do some sort of spiritual practice and we'll just do it for the rest of our days. It's like, Gatsby's list, we're just going to, I'll do this, and I'll be great, forever if I do it. And certainly religious traditions often teach us that that's so. But as we grow and open up and develop spiritually, not just ourselves, but our spiritual lives develop, different kinds of practice or no practice at all become important. It's like once you know how to do something or you get a certain spiritual lesson, it infuses your being and you just see the world that way. You don't have to keep doing the spiritual practice to get to it anymore. So for a long time, I wasn't doing anything. A long time, I just would go out in the world and see what I saw. And that came
mm,
from, imbibing the lessons of spiritual practice for a long time. Just recently, I started engaging with practice again. And, I wouldn't really talk about what that is until after I'm through this bit of it, which might take a while. But the problem is, and this, as soon as you tell somebody what your spiritual practice is, it's like they want to people think that they can just do it. It's like when you give a reading and someone's like, what's your writing process? And you're like, I can't, it's not going to do anything
right.
for you. Like, what is that? Why are you asking me this? It's not going to help you have written the book that I wrote. You have to do it your own way. I can give you thoughts on what not to do or maybe a little bit of guidance, but you can't just take the lesson and run with it because you're your own being.
Right. Right. I mean, I can tell people, well, this is the approach I use when, you know, I see an argument getting boring, I'll go a counter argument,
Mm.
or, this is how I craft a sentence. And, I could, I guess, walk people through that. But yeah, it's like what's your writing day like? It's like, dude, you don't want my writing day.
Yeah, totally.
My writing day
Yeah.
right now is just being, I got a family member in a real medical thing. My writing day is the text message. I just got one. The text messages come in about this health situation and
Mm.
prescriptions and trying to then get two sentences written in between phone calls, or then maybe I'll have MSNBC on in the background just to, keep my ire up. It's like, no, don't don't do like me.
That's the secret, guys. Just wait for the emergency text messages and right in between them.
No, it's suffering. It's suffering. Really, which is so much. It's like, oh, let me. How do you suffer?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not to
right.
get too Buddhist about it, but it's sort of like, how do you suffer? Oh, I suffer like this. Oh, which is sounds more like the conversations my grandmother used to have on the van at the retirement village. It's like, my
Right.
doctor. How long do you wait? What do you? I bring a
Exactly.
snack.
I mean, I think that there's something to be said about, and this is what I do when I work with people. When I'm doing consultations, I just give spiritual perspective on something. I just look onto the situation that the person is in, and I tell them the truth, or truth is maybe not the right word. I talk towards the truth as much as I can, so I speak honestly based on what I can see. And that seems to help people, because what you can do is say what I see in you as another, and see what that unlocks and opens up for the other person, for them to pick up and act with as they want. But it's not, it can't help everybody. I mean, when it comes to writing, for example, it's like some people just aren't, that's not what their thing is. And I sometimes someone needs to hear that. People are like, encourage your friends to be artistic. Not everybody. No, you don't actually want to encourage everybody to be artistic, because some people are really bad at it. And you can tell them what you see. I mean, you don't tell them you suck, stop doing this, because you might be
Mm,
wrong, but it's, you offer them your perspective and give them the freedom to engage with that how they want. And it's the same thing with spiritual practice. I can tell you some of the things that I understand and I know, and some things I feel like I really do know. Like when we were talking about polyamory before, that's actually, I think it's a very narrow, right now, I'm not saying this will never change, but I think it's a narrow passageway for the people that can actually really pull that off. It's the same for monogamy, by the way, but there's so much
yeah.
cultural and social support and like narrative around monogamy that people are able to manage it without a certain kind of
Right.
suffering. But in the same way that I think that hallucinogenic drugs or doing magic, these things are also, they are truly for some people's karma and spiritual development and lifetime. But that passageway is a lot narrower, I think, than people think it is, where it's just like,
Right.
these are the tools available to all of us, so we could break open the head, or, whatever term you want to use. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Breaking
And
open the
no,
bed.
right. Everyone should have DMT in eighth grade.
Yeah. Or transcendental meditation, for that matter. I mean, there's this
Right.
spiritual techniques that people think that are just applicable to everybody. It's actually not really. We don't all want the yogi sailing in his little boat into our astral bodies to help us reach some sort of spiritual state that makes us this doesn't work for everybody. So giving that
Right.
wide application is actually bad news. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had this guy on, he passed away, Mark Filippi,
Mm-hmm.
he was a kind of a somatic healer kind of guy, chiropractor, whatever. And he was really into heart rate variability,
Mm.
HRV they call it. And you can see it's really how much your heartbeats differ from each other. And there's all this information you can get from it about the way your organs and different things are related. And the people in California who are doing all the work on it kind of came up with, this is the ideal curve for your heart rate variability, and created all these sort of meditation tools and apps and things that you do to bring you
Yeah.
into that. And he's like, yeah, for about 40% of people, that's a really great way to
Mm-hmm.
be. But for the other 60%, that's not their kind of essential rhythm
Right.
of who they are. And you're just tuning people to sort of Esalen, California calm,
Right.
And
Right.
it's like, so I can go to a spiritual thing and everybody's like going out into a certain bliss state. And I'm like, that's not my state.
I mean, I think this is like, actually, this is kind of the heart of this conversation. And I think what the world expressly needs in this moment is realizing that material laws, the laws of nature, and certainly the laws of concepts, the laws of ideas, and the laws of spirit, the spiritual laws affect each person differently. I mean, it's true that people are biochemically individual. And we know that just by virtue of the person who gets stage 4 cancer diagnosis and then lives for the rest of their life, for
Mm.
until they're 95, versus the person who gets a broken leg, goes into the hospital, and then just dies from some sort of septic shock or something like that. We know that now that's not to say that there aren't commonalities, that we encounter in our lives, but it's definitely also true spiritually. Sexuality is a great place to see this. If you and I are walking down the street and I'm like, check out that chubby guy with the big ears, he's so hot, Doug, and you'd be like, I don't really see it, Conner, like and not only would you not see it, you'd have such a hard time understanding even where that desire came from for me, almost ununderstandable in some cases, that the laws of the universe affect us all differently. And we're in a time when we're being told to respond uniformly to a uniform set of challenges.
Right.
So our moment is about overcoming the pressing us into almost these exact cubes of being that all kind of look the same. What an unpopular thing to say in a way. It sounds like I'm saying the early 90s, late 80s, like fight conformity, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
really, there is a true
No, there is.
force as conformity right now.
Right. And of course, it's not just one. I mean, that's the nature of fascism. And again, thank God my listeners don't freak out at this. They've helped me with this. Fascism is on both sides of this thing. There's a way to be, and I know our red state brothers and sisters are responding to what they see as a uniformity of being on the left, and the left is responding to the fascism, authoritarianism on the right, but it's more atmospheric. This need to conform. It's like it's what McLuhan used to go. It's the media environment that we're living in that's creating these extreme binaries, and that was sort of what I was also seeing in the supposedly. See, I thought again, because I'm just reading about it, I thought that like the poly movement, the free sex, whatever, would be. I thought it would be so much less digital, but because they're living in a digital environment too, so of course I've got 5 slots in my poly, app, and it's like I'm gonna swipe her out and swipe her in, and I have another app that teaches me when to nudge each person to make sure I maintain the appropriate number of contacts per week, and that's and you see these even among burners. And I thought, Burning Man, they're going to be all sweet. Like such extreme sexual stereotypes of like the guy with the leather armbands and the gaucho hat and the women all in the flowing robes. And it's like, wow, we're even we on the so-called spiritual progressive, sexually open left thing, it's like, wow, there's such rigid prescriptions. There's such a brittleness to people's relationship to these ideals, and a reluctance to actually just be who they are. It's
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so much in what you're saying to grab onto. I mean, first, just to respond to fascism, one of the ways that you can combat fascism is by finding where it is in you. And what I don't mean is where you just hate somebody. Okay, fine. We all
right.
fucking hate people. There are people that the feeling of hate rises up in me. Now, I know that it's actually just kind of a distraction in the day. It's like getting a bee sting or like overeating or something. It's like, man, maybe it's too much, Like I don't, but I'll get over it. But what I do mean is the places where we want to move backwards to reclaim something that actually can't exist in the present, because that is the substance of fascism. So, in Ireland, there's like this huge thing about, well, okay, so in the US, obviously, it's Make America Great Again.
Yeah.
Right. It's the again part that really turns the fascist style up. Make America Great is actually a very different message than Make America Great Again, where we reach into the past to something that didn't, exactly exist. This is a trademark of a conservative movement, as well as like we've lost something that we need to regain. But then for and in Ireland, it's that we need to somehow root out all the things that have come here that have changed Ireland. And people have been making these arguments about Ireland for decades, centuries probably. I have a book from 1930 that's called The New Ireland, where people are using new versus old fights. So when I talk about fighting fascism ourselves, I'm talking about find that place in yourself that wants to go backwards or that's clinging to the thing that's keeping you stuck in a time period in your life. So for me, I have this stretch of time in my life where I was a sex worker. I was very successful at it.
And a porn fucking
I was a
star.
porn star. Yeah. Like, I mean, I got about,
So there were, I mean, I can't even imagine there were tens of thousands of people masturbating to your image.
yeah.
You
When,
know, that's
what do
got
you
to be
say
a
to me? Like,
high, right?
yeah, when I remember meeting you in San Francisco when I was in the midst of that, and you were
Yeah.
like, you didn't even say hi. You're like, what's it like being a human orgone accumulator?
Yeah.
But I am, but I know that like that period of my life was really fun. And if I look back on it, it seems to be easy. It wasn't any of that. I mean, it was fun, but it wasn't easy. It was very
Right.
difficult. It's challenging, had all its like own pitfalls. But the part of me that wants to go back to that is the fascist part of me. It doesn't look the
Mm,
same as me going out and beating someone up who's not the
right.
same race as me. It looks like me hoping that I can re-evoke something that is actually inappropriate for this time in my life and in my destiny. And people do that all the time. And we really have to resist that because we need to move forward now. And I don't mean progressive or progress. I mean, we need to bring forward out of ourselves who we're supposed to be. And then, the other thing I want to say about this, like, this binary thing that you were talking about. I mean, of course, the language of technology is still as complex as it is. It really has this 0-1, relationship to it, and it's so funny to me that there's like off on, yes, no, live, die, all this like this yes or no quality to technology, still, even as complex as it is, that we need to be able to insert something between that 0 and 1 that actually breaks up the limited availability of options to us. So, and it's not just creating more zeros and ones so it doesn't look like
Right.
we only
So
have
it's
two.
not greater granularity.
That's
It's,
right. It's not
yeah.
crystallization where we accrete from the outside. It's actually a going in and moving and opening up something. So we find what's there. And isn't it interesting that a lot of the people who were against, say claim to be against big tech or the Great Reset or the World Economic Forum end up being fascists who have this very you're in my community, you're out of my community. You deserve to live, you deserve to die. You deserve these rights, you don't. They have the mentality of a computer. So while they say they're fighting against it, they're actually emulating the very technology that they claim to be, representing some sort of opposition to.
Right. Well, and I pointed that out about the sort of the identitarian left as well. It's
Totally.
like find the precise place on the Cartesian grid of identity, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like you could come up with a decimal for exactly where you are on the gender, goth, sexuality, who knows what, capitalism. You'll find your, you know,
Yeah. It looks like there's more options there in a way. I mean, I do think that there's the genuine um should I say the genuine wellspring of the left is not exactly that, but it's related to it in a way, which is that there's a really intense commonwealth to draw on. Because, for instance, I know as someone who grew up with gay identity in a straight world, I knew all these survival strategies. I knew how to talk to people differently. I knew how to signal to people that I was gay. I knew how to live in a world that was, and so I had all these like tactics, strategies, ideas, all these things that I noticed that other people didn't notice that were related directly to my identity, or maybe I didn't call it an identity then, but my identity. And so there is this vast commonwealth of all people who have been oppressed in one way or another, where they have all these strategies. And that actually is something that is an opening up. And I think that this is this major asset, this beautiful economy of connectivity that when people from the right, from who are conservative, find themselves rightfully disillusioned with the people that they thought were going to help them, in the same way that the left should have been disillusioned by Biden, for instance, and that whole administration, that they'll come to the left and instead of turning them away, saying, look, we've got all this understanding that we've built up over time, and you guys have your own understanding, but this is understanding related to these specific oppressed identities, all that kind of stuff. We know how to resist in ways that you guys don't know how to resist. We know how to actually be creative and flourish in ways that you don't. And so I think sometimes when we think that there's a binary, if we kind of scratch the surface of that, we can find that there actually is a well somewhere in there that's useful to people.
Oh yeah, I mean the stuff that one side can learn from the other. It's like I would love for my blue state suburban progressives to go to red states and ask like, how do you summon the courage to knock on a neighbor's door? And they're like, "Oh, I'll show you.
Yeah.
Come on,
we're cooking.
do it
We're cooking brownies.
Knock, knock. Exactly. Knock, knock, knock. This is how you do it. You just knock, knock, knock. Hey, Joe, how are you? Don't freak out.
Yeah,
It's gonna be okay.
And also, I sort of surprised my friend the other day. She was kind of bemoaning some of the stuff that was going on in the world. And I was like, I've been listening to these like CEO, like Stephen Bartlett's podcast and stuff like that. I mean, I might listen to those anyway, but you get this picture of all these people like, this is a time of great opportunity. There's so much going on. And we would be really foolish to dismiss all of that just because we have some sort of political positioning in relationship to people that have all that money. Of course, some of that is coming from their state of privilege and their ability to manipulate their own environments and ignore the needs of others. Of course. And yet, the fact that they're able to hold, in many cases, genuine hope and see things completely differently, it really does have a great value to us in that commonwealth that we can draw upon. Now, it's not always easy to communicate with people like that. And it's not always easy to show them where they're ignoring the suffering of others to prop up their ability to have that perspective. Yet the fact that they're able to hold that at all should mean something to us and should indicate something to us that we can connect to and draw on for ourselves and our own lives.
Right. Which it goes back to even that moment when, Trump got glanced on the ear and managed to summon the courage. I mean, if he instead of fight, if he had been love, right. I love you guys, right. We're going to be okay. My God, it would have been, but that would have been Gandhi's response, not, I mean, mine still would have been like, get me out of here, I'm afraid, protect me, So I do look at the Trump thing as like, wow, and there is, unfortunately, it's not, you don't make the guy president, but there is something you can look at in him and others. You're right, of like, oh, what are they doing?
I think when you were talking about, raising your fist and be, but I think about that in terms of when I think about it in terms of Israel. One of the things when October 7th, the events of October 7th happened, and people were like, "Well, what were they supposed to do? Nothing." And I was always like, "Yes, that would have been the most profound thing that they could have done." And the reason, and now if you carry that thought out, of course that wouldn't have gone that far, because in the same thing, like if Trump had said love, love, everything, some new thing would have taken root. People are always vying to give themselves power by seizing the attention of others.
Right.
But the thing about a loving response is that love is a giving capacity. When you do something loving, it enables you to do more loving things. So actually, it creates an opening that more becomes available to you when you respond in that way. And if you think about, yes, the response to Israel, the response to Trump, the response that if they would have responded with love in these crazed, intense moments, think about how different any one of those situations, any situation you can think of like that would have been completely different than some sort of, grandstanding, retaliation, violence, whatever it might be.
Yeah, interestingly, I gave this talk at Purdue, and afterwards I got to have dinner with these professors who are, way better read and know more philosophy and all that than I do. And we were talking not just about, but the question of Israel came up, and I said, well, because I have such trouble with what ceasefire and this and that, what to say, and I was like, I think I've become a pacifist.
Mm.
And they basically argued that doesn't work, and then I didn't have answers for it. But what about colonial powers? And the colonial powers came to South America. You think they should have been pacifist? And I said, I can't right now imagine a better response if they come.
Exactly.
And that's basically it. Like if they come for me. At a certain point, it's like, how many of us can they? First, they're not. Who are they? But how many of us can they kill? Eventually, if everybody's just like, I guess then they kill us all and have robots instead, or.
That is the response, right? You have to. A pacifist response, which I am a pacifist, is I have to be more willing to die than to kill. And that is
right.
and that is not. You have to be careful because, of course, self-defense is available even to a pacifist. But then when you say that, people are like, well, self-defense, also includes these complex geopolitical situations, or when the oppressor brings all the violence and okay.
Stuff's happening at scale. It's hard.
I
don't know if it works on every level.
Well, I don't think it does work at scale, right? Like, I think it's more like self-defense is like, it works if it's me or if it's you, or if you're in like a tricky situation where that's the way. But also, usually when people try to scale it, they're not talking about having exhausted the other options at first either, right?
Right.
Something I would love so many of us to learn in this moment is de-escalation. Do you know how to de-escalate? That is actually part of my duty as a pacifist, which I'm not upholding, by the way. I have de-escalated situations where someone was screaming or looked like they were going to hit somebody or whatever, and I just brought it down. Great spiritual initiates can, St. Francis pet the wolf, and he stopped killing, stopped killing other animals in the village. The wolf bent down, and that's part of when you have a certain kind of presence. Your presence alone can de-escalate a situation, but you do have to then, in the eye of all of this, be able to confront and see your own death. And what does that mean? And can you see your death as not the end? And how, and can you see, living at all costs actually being an enemy to you rather than your friend? Yeah.
Right. Or even you see the end of life, even if it is the end.
Yeah.
And then okay with that, this was good,
yeah. Way better than living forever, which is the tech.
Right. And that I won't know, so if there's nothing, at least, it's not like hemorrhoids forever or something, it's just nothing, right? There's nothing will bother you, which is better than bad.
I think real, in some ways, even this conversation is indicating that we've kind of discarded the option of hell being a possibility, because then it's not just, I'll just either die or it'll be great and I'll reincarnate. No,
I feel like I understand what hell is and how I generate it in my experience, and there's greater and greater challenges come that are harder and harder to metabolize in, that's what I always tell myself is my practice is just stop and take 2 breaths, it's a practice which requires discipline,
Well, can I give you a little bit of a thought on you living your life? Right now, in the world, we're being asked to do more with less time and space. And what that means is that we have to really get clear on the things that matter, the things that really, truly are part of who we are, as I've been
Mm.
saying all along in this, but because doing less is actually not really an option. And I think everybody's feeling that. And well, I shouldn't speak for everybody. Lots of people are feeling
Yeah.
that in one way or another, whether it's that they had to have 5 to 10 jobs in a gig economy, or
Yeah.
it's that, they just, their minds are going crazy because there's so much going on in the world and they can't contain it all or whatever. Doing less isn't an option. You actually have to do more. But what we could be doing is more with what we're meant to be doing the more with. And, every time, I think literally since I've known you, except maybe the first time we had a real conversation, which was when we were sitting in the sauna and there was no
Yeah.
one else around, and there was nothing interrupting the conversation, and we were both just totally relaxed, and we didn't really know each other. There was nothing else
Yeah.
happening in that moment. Since that moment, you've been in between 30 things every time I've talked with you.
Right.
And that's going to keep coming at you, obviously, but it's really about which of these matter. How do I go deeper into my capacity to be with the things that matter? And then the other things, I don't have to say no to every single thing, but I allow them to fall away, and they actually naturally will the more time I spend with what matters. And
Right.
that's taking 2 breaths. That's actually just breathing. That's actually, you don't have to take 2 breaths because you're breathing well while you're doing shit,
Yeah, but it's also getting out of the codependent, what I've been told is Pisces rising tendency, because you can hear it even in, it's like, is it okay if I just do my work and don't protest today? Is it okay if everything? And I, I have an inbox with literally 500 messages a day
Yeah.
from people with books and ideas and just can I guess have 15 minutes on the phone. So, I started to do this thing, which every Thursday I'm going to do 40 15-minute phone calls, and it's like, this is not helping me or anybody.
No. Yeah.
And I look,
What
and
about the
it's like,
person needs 20 minutes, Doug?
yeah, exactly. And I don't actually know how to start a new social net. I don't. Your crypto idea, you're this, you're that.
Yeah.
It's like there is a certain point at which I'm doing this work, and every one of those I do means the work I'm actually doing can't happen. There's one less episode of the show, one less monologue, one less article, and it's like if I can have the confidence that the full full potential of what I am is realized by
That's right.
by being. It's an interesting companion to pacifism. It's like, if you want to come and kill me, come and kill me, but I'm going to manifest as me right now until you do.
That's right. I mean, it's so important because the fool's walking towards the world, right? Which is the end of the major arcana, which is a woman who stands at the center of the radiation of everything, watched by the 4 archangels, one in each of the corners, represented by the sacred beings of the winged bull, the winged human, the winged lion, and the eagle. That the fullness of being actually radiates out into the entirety of the world. That's true about everything we do anyway. By the way,
Yeah.
all our dumb, errant bullshit mistakes and wasting time and, scrolling and making the wrong decisions about whether I should give this talk or have this guest on the podcast or whatever my own anxieties are. All of that radiates out into the world and creates, but people say thought forms, I would call them elementals. It radiates all that out into the world. But when you're on that path, it is encountering each one of those stations along the way until you get to the place where you are that radiant being, who's very happy in the center there, and
Right.
everything's available to her as well. Yeah.
Right. And she's the one. She's the one, like the people that were getting taken away and making the guards cry.
That's right.
Because she's
That's right.
manifesting.
They're on stamps. I mean, I don't know how much.
Yeah.
I don't know how much a Scholl's Hans and Sophie Scholl stamp matters in Germany right now, actually, but they got to be on stamps.
so did Superman.
That's true. So did Garfield, I think.
Yeah, there's a bunch, right? And the 1968 Camaro and Bucky Fuller. Speaking of stamps, but gosh, it's good to connect with you. I know some of this is, we'll see. I think we keep it all, but I know that there's personal healing happening along with the with the public conversation, and I just want to acknowledge that. I know you're also being there for me.
Well, I love you. I love you.
I love you too.
Yeah. I mean, always have, always will.
Yeah, it's good. I'm glad to have you along on this journey, and to be here for yours too.
Thanks, Doug.
So we're gonna pick up this conversation on Against Everyone, which is Conner Habib's podcast. So I guess listen to this one first. Well, you already have, so you did that job. Listen to this one first, and then hop over to Conner's podcast, and we're going to continue this conversation in a few days.
Yeah, that's when it gets really, really scary. So make sure you tune into that
Cool.
one.
I'll be in his zone. No holes barred. It's all good. All right, and let's do it before the tariffs come into effect, and we have to pay for each other's
Oh my God.
footage.
Oh my God.
We
No.
won't. It's okay.
No.
It won't affect that. And thank you for being on Team Human. Our guest today was Conner Habib. You can get his new novel, Hawk Mountain, wherever daring books are sold, and listen to his podcast, Against Everyone, anywhere. You can become a subscriber to Team Human by going to Patreon or to teamhuman.fm and clicking on support. You'll get access to our Discord, ad-free shows, and free tickets to live events. Team Human is produced by Joshua Chapdelaine and engineered and edited by the fine folks at MCM. I'm Douglas Rushkoff, and you've been on Team Human, our last best hope for peeps.
Did you know laundry dryer sheets are actually plastic, and the first ingredient is crude oil? It's in your clothes, on your skin, and piling up in landfills. That's why we invented Cobi, spelled C-O-B-I. C-O for cotton and B-I for biodegradable. The first all-cotton, 100% biodegradable dryer sheet that works better than those toxic alternatives. No chemicals, no plastic. Just soft, static-free clothes that are safe for your family and the planet. Save 10% on your first order at CobiDryerSheets.com. That's CobiDryersheets.com.